Welcome to the learning module dedicated to the topic of assessment as learning. In this module, we will focus on three main questions. The first question is, how can we help turn our classrooms and our learning organizations into places that provide fishing lessons rather than being fish distribution centers? The second question is, what's the difference between assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning? The third question is, how can we help cultivate a classroom and how can we help design a lesson that promotes assessment as learning? So let's get started. The first question, the distinction between a place of fishing lessons or a fish distribution center is based upon that almost cliche phrase. If you give a man a fish, he'll have fish for today. If you teach a man to fish, he'll have fish for a lifetime. Well, the heart of this module is about teaching people to fish. So how do we create classrooms where students learn how to fish or learn how to learn? So in some classrooms, the focus is upon distributing knowledge to students who then learn it and they report it back. But in an assessment as learning type of classroom, a place that provides fishing lessons, it's about helping students develop the knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary to gain new knowledge, skills, and ability. We're helping them grow as self-directed learners, as people who don't just come to pick up a fish, but people who can go out and they can find their own fish. They can fish for their own food. And that's what we're going to explore in terms of knowledge and skill acquisition in learning organizations. The second question is, what's the difference between the assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning? Now, I'll confess that I get confused when I talk about these three terms, and it's really not that important that you have a clear distinction between all three, I suppose. But it is a way for us to sort of pull out the differences in approaches to assessment in a learning organization or in a classroom. So let's give this a shot. Assessment of learning is sort of like summative assessment. In fact, assessment of learning is summative assessment. That's where we're assessing what has happened. What have students learned? It's something that's done maybe at the end. We're just finding out the end result. What did they learn and what didn't they learn? That's assessment of learning. But assessment for learning is formative assessment. It's where we make use of assessment to help students figure out where they are right now. And then the student can adjust or the teacher can adjust the lesson or learning experience in order to help them get as much as they can out of it and to progress toward that end goal, whatever it might be. Now we have this third one though, assessment as learning. Now, assessment as learning is a phrase that's intended to emphasize the idea that even within the assessment, we're learning something substantive, we're learning something new. Now, assessment as learning tends to be focused upon this phrase of metacognitive skills or thinking about thinking, or in this case, learning about learning. So assessment as learning is an approach that challenges students to engage in assessment questions and reflections and explorations that help them not only think about the content or the subject at hand, but they think about themselves as learners. What strategies help me learn? What sort of a learner am I? Do I have certain approaches to learning that I lean on? They learn about study skills, they learn about research skills, about information literacy skills. They learn about themselves and about how to grow as effective learners. Or back to that first question, they learn how to fish for themselves. And that's what we're going to focus upon in this module. You have a couple of excellent readings, one in particular that will really challenge you to think deeply about this concept of assessment as learning. And that brings us to our third and final question for this module, which is, how can we design a classroom, or more specifically, a learning experience or a lesson that helps cultivate an assessment as learning mindset? Well, your readings and other resources in this unit will challenge you to do that, and then if you choose, you'll have a chance to pursue a badge where you design a lesson that promotes assessment as learning. So let's go ahead and get started.